Okay, so we can start.
Absolutely. Take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Misha, for the introduction. Very happy to be here today. Hi, everyone. I'm Lee. I'm one of the founders and the CEO of Suridata, and I'm here to talk today with you about keeping up with securing the very complex SaaS environment. And let's start. I think that I don't have to talk much about it, but SaaS is really becoming the way we connect, engage, communicate. It's really great for the business, but the business adopts new applications very quickly, and business owners don't really think about security on their day-to-day basis, but security teams do. And what we've seen so far is that SaaS generates complex relationships between users, applications, third-party integrations, starting from how to protect the application itself, all the way to how it is communicating with other applications, users, inside, outside of the application. You can't really solve one aspect and ignore the others because they're all related. This results in having a lot of security controls and implement them, which vary between different type of application. Securing GitHub, completely different than securing Salesforce, HubSpot, Zoom, Atlassian, and others. Instead of talking about it, it can just showing you how it actually feels, right? It better describes how it feels when you try to secure one environment, reduce run risk, and then immediately another one pops up. And I think that when we're talking about SaaS in general, there are a few main challenges in securing those environments. First, there is high dependency on SaaS providers for security, right? If you rely on Salesforce, on Gmail, on Microsoft 365, on Slack, each of them has its own environment, right? There is no one standard that exists when you try to protect those applications. Sorry, I think you can still see it now. Yes. The second thing is that there is no one consolidated dashboard. You have to go up by up manually. Try to understand what doesn't work well, what are the risks, how to configure it right, how to make sure that the use is done securely. There is no one dashboard to see all this information together. And last but not least is the shared security responsibility between the SaaS provider and the organization which using it. And you can see more about it here. The fact that you're using Slack and Salesforce doesn't mean that they're actually securing the use of those applications. The vendor side will make sure that they're protecting their own infrastructure. They will do application security. They will make sure their own infrastructure is secured. But the application which using it needs to make sure that the use of each and every application is done securely. It means looking for configuration, settings, hardening, but also looking at continuous monitoring and what users do. There's so many environments and so many capabilities, which is great for business owners when they rely on SaaS applications. But it became a real challenge when you have to implement the security controls your own. And what we've seen so far is that current solutions do not address the new risks that SaaS brings. And I'll give a few examples. CASB, the very first solution when you think about SaaS environment. So it's great if you want to identify data exposures, but not if you want to properly configure each and every SaaS application used. Second option that we see quite often is IDPs. They will do a great work managing the identities, but not in helping protecting against risky plugins, add-ons, OAuth, tokens, connections. SASE will make sure that the management of users' connection to those environments is secured, but not in protecting the application itself. And some that like to do an annual assessment. It's great if you want to check mark on your checklist, but not if you want to be aware of the changes throughout the year and mitigate them in a timely manner before a breach occurred. And if we're looking on some real-life examples, we can talk about first the Okta breach, which affected hundreds of Okta customers. A group of attackers, lapsus, were able to gain access to one of Okta support employee. And by doing so and manipulating the support access misconfiguration, they obtained access to all the customers' environment, which were not configured properly. So eventually they were able to access their data and modify or steal it. Another example we saw was Uber. Uber had a few breaches recently. One of them was a breach through Slack, which combined two security violations that Uber didn't mitigate in time. They had passwords to critical systems stored in their Slack channels, and they didn't enable the sign-in challenge configuration. So the attacker was able to gain access to Uber's GitHub and steal code repositories. So those are a few of the examples that we see. And Gartner's gave this action a name. They call it SSPM, SaaS Security Posture Management. Simply, it means the ability to oversee the security aspects across all, or at least most, or business critical SaaS applications, making sure they're all keeping up with the requirements and security standards and measurements. This is a centralized system to manage your security, your SaaS security risks, allocating resources based on priorities. And when you're looking at SSPM, it was mentioned in two of Gartner's reports, there are really hundreds of SaaS applications. That's why the need for a solution like this is constantly increasing. It's very hard to do it manual. And when you're looking at this environment, SSPM is supposed to reduce risk by continuously scanning and looking for eliminating configuration mistakes, drifting, overly scope permissions, which present, most of the common forms of security failures in those type of environments. So that's about what we've seen through Gartner. And if you're looking at what actually SSPM is and what's the value, as mentioned, it's a very centralized control that you can have across all those environments. It touched 4 main points of risk in those environments. The first one is the misconfiguration management. It means that what are actually going to be the settings that need to be either enabled or disabled in the environment. Second one will be what applications can access the business critical SaaS applications. Third layer will be the detection and response part. What users do after they onboard each and every SaaS application, how they can access, how they expose data. With SSPM, the security and IT team no longer have to be an expert in each and every SaaS. That's a real challenge to understand what risk exists in Salesforce, which one exists in Zoom, which one exists in Jira or Confluence. And those type of solution can alert on any risk, on any misconfiguration, anything that could jeopardize the business continuity. So that's how we're looking at understanding what is really SSPM. And if we're drilling down to the 4 use cases, I can show what is the actual challenge. So when you adopt solutions very easily, like any new application, the challenge is to understand how to monitor the changes. Salesforce will allow new capabilities, new settings very often, and no one knows about it. You need to be able to monitor it, to understand what is actually a misconfiguration. How do you know it, right? How do you set up a baseline? What is actually considered to be the right security measures and controls in the environment? So monitoring and resolving it in near real time, that's a capability that is very important to have in a SaaS security tool. Another layer will be analysis of all the plugins, all the OAuth tokens, webhooks, everything can connect to the SaaS environment. Usually employees have the freedom to connect and authorize new plugins and new add-ons. But the thing is that after the first approval, no one monitors it. What type of access it can data, what type of action it can be done. It can done in the environment. A lot of time we see R&D plugins that their behavior is not very normal or can be expected. So if there is no continuous monitoring on the actions that can be done through the plugin, it's a high risk that no one monitors. Another component would be the user's risk. What users do in the environment, how they behave, what considered to be a normal behavior of a user in an application. So when you have a component that monitors the user behavior, you understand what's the baseline and what considered to be a normal activity. And when something is abnormal, you can very easily monitor it and alert it. So an action can be taken near real time, such as revoke permission, such as quarantine a certain user, even changing the password to make sure that they actually accessing the thing that they need to. And last but not least is how data is being transferred. It can be either between application, you can connect to Slack and then authorize to Jira to connect to Slack directly, right? So the data that is transferring between app to app, between SaaS to SaaS is a very fluid situation when you would like to monitor and understand how people share, downloaded, authorized, and you want to make sure that you're remediating in near real time, either through an automated workflow or just manual monitoring and actions that can be taken directly with the end user. So that's the last piece in the puzzle. And if I'll summarize, I think that if the organization adopts SaaS application very, very quickly in high pace, a comprehensive security controls and measurements, it's very important to make sure that the business will be able to keep adopting them very quickly, but it will be done securely. So having one consolidated platform that is looking at all type of risks and can analyze their impact on their business, that's the important part. Visibility, I think it's the easiest part, but understanding what is more critical to the business, what actually poses risk on the organization, need your attention and resources, that's something that we find is very important when you're managing a very large ecosystem of SaaS applications. So that's it on my end. Hope you was able to share us from our experience and what we've seen so far, and happy to answer any question when you'll have.
So, Lee, recently, U.S. national cybersecurity policy was published, and one of the aspects, there were several cornerstone positions there, but one of them talked about shifting responsibility for cybersecurity on software providers. And with this in mind, do you expect going forward that SaaS providers will feel the potential liability and will invest more in providing more secure SaaS applications out of the box, helping essentially users to be more secure and help avoid some of those misconfigurations and some of those potential pitfalls for abuse kind of down the line? Again, it's probably an evolving topic, but I was just wondering what your thoughts would be on that. And Idan, for you, I also have a question, since it seems like open source is such a big part of the technology ecosystem and it's relied on by so many organizations. Do you see examples when malicious actors proactively reach out to developers who have been maintaining the code for so many years, they're not paid, and offer them, hey, we'll cut you a deal, just make your packages available and we'll selectively install backdoors and malicious code and it will get distributed and you'll get paid. So do you see this kind of behavior, which to me, I mean, it's obviously already concerning that some of them may not be as cybersecurity savvy as they should have been, leading to the examples that you identified. But I'm wondering if you see examples of malicious actors proactively reaching out to developers and trying to kind of convert them and push them to the dark side. So those are the questions, but I also encourage everyone on the call to think of your questions for Lee and Idan.
Okay, so I can start with the first question. I would love to see SaaS provider put more thoughts on this. I think the way they see it is that they're providing the tool. They provided you a box of tools that you can use, right? Because every organization is different. They're different in the baseline that they want to enforce. They're different in the frameworks that they're relying on and aligning with. And they want to make sure that they're providing flexibility with security. It's very balanced, right? You want to enable, have the agility and the flexibility and all the great benefits of SaaS, but if you're gonna secure it so tightly, you won't enjoy it, right? You won't have all the great benefit that SaaS brings. So my thought is that they're gonna provide more tools, more settings, more capabilities, but it still will be the organization's responsibility, or part of the job to make sure that they're enforcing it right, they're implementing the right controls according to their needs. We see even today that every few weeks there are new capabilities, new settings, new features that are being released by the SaaS provider. So I think that it will be even harder to keep up with the very growing change in this type of part. So I hope they will keep doing this, increasing more capabilities and more tools that allow the organization to secure the use much better. I don't think it's going to be easier, because they want to allow the flexibility, and every organization has different guidelines and controls that they want to enforce. But I definitely see it evolves over time, because I can say that there are SaaS providers that provide very high or very in-depth capabilities. In Microsoft, we see over 400 settings that can be configured, versus the smaller providers that can allow sometimes 10 or 20 or 30 settings. So I see that it will be increased. That's what
Certainly. So it sounds like because software providers would want to have end users to have flexibility and provide all those different tabs that the end users can turn. By the virtue of that fact, it will never be 100% secure, just because the users inadvertently can misconfigure their SaaS environment and therefore expose themselves to a risk, which necessitates an oversight, kind of a third-party oversight of the SaaS environment. I understand. Well, thank you.
Question for Lee. So Lee, I know you didn't get into too much detail, but one question I had is, do you have the ability for the user of your software to focus on the most urgent alerts, really categorizing the level of urgency of different types of alerts? And also, do you integrate with SIM solutions?
So the short answer for both questions are yes. The long answer for the first question is that's, if you ask me what makes Suridata solution different, is the BIP, business impact prioritization. It's a mechanism, it's an engine we've built in order to be able to provide analytics and criticality risk score to each and every gap. So it's a risk score between 0 to 100 that indicates on the criticality in the business and help you understand where to prioritize, how to prioritize and where to invest the resources. And the second question is, we have direct integration to Splunk, and also an API that you can use. You can utilize to other SIEM or SOAR systems.
Excellent, thank you.
Great.
Question for Lee. On the product, is it going deeper into the entitlements within the application, and you're pulling that information down to determine anomalies? Is that the element, or is it going to rest upon the previous established access controls within the application? What's the distinguishing factor there?
So we look at permissions and not to the main business application like Salesforce, but we will look at permissions to all the plugins connected to Salesforce. Our goal is not to manage, entitlements or permissions to enforce these privileges, but to provide the risk analysis around the plugins. So in Salesforce, we'll be able to show you the users, their level of permission, and any other type of information we get from the IDP. But actually the risk analysis that looks at permission, activity, and monitors the behavior, it usually directed into two areas. The first is the add-ons. So if you look at Salesforce, we'll do the permission analysis to all the ecosystem of Salesforce. So every application that was authorized by user will show the permission, and based on this and other parameters, we'll be able to provide recommendation of how critical it is to the business, so we'll know if to focus time and resources there. And second thing is we look at permissions as part of monitoring the user's behavior. So we're creating a risk score per user in order to understand if there is abnormal activity. And monitoring the permission, that's part of gaining this analysis. So.
Thank you.
Lee, would you say this fits into a insider threat management solution as well?
Yes, the part of the users, yes, for sure.
I have a question for Lee. Does your solution also include any kind of API-based integration, or just user-based integration with like a SaaS solution? Because there's no user in API. Does your solution handle that? Can take care of the API security risks?
So we're not an API security solution. We do integrate with the SaaS provider through an API, but we're not securing the API itself. We do look at all the connections in the ecosystem of each app, as mentioned, but we're not doing any API security, as like Salt or Neosec or any other those type of solutions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have a question also to Lee, but before that, I have to tell you, Tim, you have a very beautiful cat. Yes, Mai is next to my chair. So the question is, the biggest problem is having shadow IT. So even we don't know what kind of application used by the users. So if we are aware that we have Slang, we have Trello, whatever, and we try to protect them, it's fine. But is your tool capable to figure it out what else deployed by the employees and can report it back and start to protect us as well?
So we've seen that CASB try to do it, right? To provide a very, very broad coverage. But then what we've seen is no one were able to actually do anything about it, right? You'll see a list of 8,000 integration, and then what next? You're not going to invest it one by one. So we've decided to gain this visibility from the application. So if we're connected to all your business critical application and we're reaching 100 applications soon, we'll be able to gain the visibility, the shadow discovery from those applications. So we'll reach to around 85% of discovery, which is mostly focused on what really matters, right? We're not going to show visibility that someone used that Chipotle, right? Or any other vendor that is not really relevant or do you want to protect, right? So we decided to take this approach to reduce the noise and focus on handling the visibility that you can actually do something about it.
Thanks, it makes sense.
One more question, Lee.
Sure.
On the behavior of the learning, and I think that's good learning on the behavior. Does it have any challenges if you have a lot of agile teams and there's multiple folks working? So the amount of time to learn or that behavior for that anomaly, are there any challenges with that?
Two things. First, there's always challenges, right? But I'll tell you what we've done to get precise answers. So first, we're doing learning of every 90 days. We're not going to show any results before we're having a good analysis of the previous 90 days in order to set up a baseline and understand what is normal in the organization. We usually monitor at least 10 SaaS applications. So we have a very broad types of actions that the users can do. And we kind of normalize it between different type of applications. And second, we have a threshold that can be changed manually. So for example, if you see the results out of 10,000 employees, you see monitoring, you see risky users that are relevant, like 5 risky users or 500 users, right? That's too much and that's not enough. So you can tune it yourself or with our team to make sure the baseline will be tuned manually, right? Because you want to make sure that you're not just taking the algorithms and see what they provide without any feedback. So usually as part of the first and second quarter, we're going to look at this together and we'll tune it manually if needed. Not in all cases it is something that's needed. It's pretty accurate, but you can tune it if you want to get more broader analysis, or if you want to be more precise, or which will create less results to analyze manually. So we do a massive learning and also a manual tuning.
Mass every 90 days. That's correct.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So make sure that you have monitoring across all the SaaS environment, looking at the 3 main critical pillars of SaaS, which is the application user, how to harden it correctly according to best practices and security frameworks. Second, monitor users' behavior. And third, gain visibility and analysis on all the ecosystem related to the business critical applications.
Perfect. Lee, Idan, thank you so much for sharing your insights today.